the first death in Allegheny County occurred in March, shortly after the shutdown. It was a 90-year-old person. This is someone who had lived in Clairton their life. They were exposed to higher levels of pollution, and sadly, that weakens immune system, resiliency, lung functioning. It's not a surprise that someone with that health history would be vulnerable to a disease like COVID-19.
The disease seems to be associated with communities of color, the aged, areas that have a greater depth of their population represented by those groups will also be skewed towards having worse outcomes.
That's 2 to 3 times what we see across the state of Pennsylvania as well as nationally. We know that there are some long-term complications of COVID.
Back in March, I had a consistent sore throat. Wasn't painful, but it was just a sore throat. It was consistent, went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. I thought it was COVID, kind of scared me. And I finally went to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with allergies. And I said there has to be a connection.
There's been research done nationally, internationally, that has demonstrated that air pollution exposure increases your chance of dying of COVID by almost 20% in the United States. Businesses that have been wiped out by COVID haven't been able to operate. Restaurants that have been closed. Steel industry continues to operate and continues to pollute. Why is that?
Not an awful lot has changed in terms of air quality within the region. There's been no sort of major systemic improvements.
In November of 2020, we had 7 days of tremendous air pollution in our area. On November 9th, the Allegheny County Health Department issued a warning. At the end, after the 7 days had already transpired. And what was their warning? That citizens should use fewer gas-powered lawn equipment. Why isn't industry told to cut back on production during that point in time?
Our breathe cameras have captured incidents of the Edgar Thomson Steel Works blast furnaces belching red plumes that are very opaque, that go high into the sky and then dissipate. And then you can see spikes in monitors. Over the summer, we see these events that might last 4, 5, 7, 9 hours. A lot of industrial facilities started curtailing production, and some of the blast furnaces went offline about a year ago. And so that's resulted in a little bit less because of reduced production. You don't see the rush hour pollution spikes on monitors like you saw in prior years. Scientists that we work with did determine earlier this year that there really was a reduction in air pollution.
May of 2019, U.S. Steel announced that it was going to spend $1.2 billion upgrading its Mon Valley Works, the greatest source of pollution in this area. Since that time, they've spent almost $2 billion in Arkansas and Alabama, creating mini mills, advanced technology, and the bottom line is they haven't done a thing in the Mon Valley.
There's days where, I can't even do my exercise. I was chased back inside because my heart started to palpitate. And I knew it was directly related to the air.
We have 2 pandemics. We have a pollution and a virus pandemic. And both of those target the cardiovascular and pulmonary systems and cause damaging inflammation and dysfunction.
Diesel exhaust is a major contributor to air pollution within the county. We don't appreciate it quite so much because we can't point to that big single smokestack that's making the sky gray all around it, and we can smell it. Diesel buses are all over. We have rail corridors that go through the city, which are certainly being considered for an expansion.
Train pollution, in particular black carbon diesel, is a Group 1 known carcinogen.
Freight railroad is the most environmentally friendly way to transport goods. One single train can take thousands of trucks off of the highway. We can move freight hundreds of miles on less than 10 gallons of diesel.
Barbara and I co-founded Rail Pollution Protection Pittsburgh because now, more than ever, it's necessary to address rail proliferation where it conflicts with urban health and safety.
Norfolk Southern Railroad is looking to expand their current operations by including double stack trains that go through the city of Pittsburgh, as well as they're trying to increase the frequency of how often those trains come through different communities. And so it's very concerning because of all of the potential hazards and harms that could be caused to our communities. I bought my house in 2015. The same day that I bought it, moved in, put my bed in, and I slept there. You literally can feel the house vibrate and shake every time a train goes by.
This is an existing route that is already used by a number of trains. What we're doing is essentially shifting some traffic. Trains that are already using the south will now be able to shift them over to the northern route. We'll move the double stack container trains to the northern route.
70 or 80 trains per day is the actual equivalent of 5,440 diesel buses passing your doorstep every single day. For every hour of idling of a train, it's one pollution-related death a year. Now, one of the highest level environmental justice areas in the city is the Manchester community right next to ours.
There's almost 80% African Americans who live in Manchester. There's a higher risk of health issues for Black and brown communities. And it's very problematic because these trains run all times of the day through our community, and they are putting different particles, black carcinogens, into the air.
We don't have a problem with trains. We want them to be safer and cleaner and just do oversight. We're proposing at Norfolk Southern's Altoona, Pennsylvania plant to manufacture scrubbers for existing older locomotives, Tier 4, which are much cleaner locomotive engines, and cleaner switching engines. And that's a win-win because the state gets more jobs and we all get cleaner air.
We are technically in mediation with the different parties that are involved, which is something that we welcome. We want to show show that we're responsible corporate citizens in these areas.
About 180,000 people live within a quarter mile of this rail line that goes from McKees Rocks to Braddock on the eastern side of Braddock. And all of those people are at risk.
We feel like our community is being leveraged and being taken advantage of, and we want to prevent that from happening.
I started working for Women for a Healthy Environment a year ago, and what we do is we educate communities around environmental issues. So anywhere from plastics that are bad for your home to the environment that's bad for your home. I come from a Mon Valley town, grew up in Duquesne. I knew the air was not healthy. My dad worked in the mill, my uncles worked in the mill. So it put food on our table, kept a roof over our head. But there's a saying that when you know better, you do better. And in this day and time, there's technology. There are things that I believe US still can do to improve the air quality. And so here I am. I feel like I've been given a task as a gatekeeper of the community to educate individuals and just to let them know they have rights.
The communities that are closest to the polluters tend to be the communities that have the fewest resources. They may not have the resources to be able to move somewhere else, and what can they do about it?
Clairton also has a very high poverty rate. So just to get up and move it's really not an option. It's not an option. I mean, even my children say that to me, we should move. I can't.
In Allegheny County, there is a high rate of asthma amongst young Black and brown folks. And as a new parent, I have a 1-year-old son. It's very concerning. And to know that there are carcinogens that are going through the air while my son is out in the yard playing, that he could be breathing, is very alarming to me. But also as an advocate, I understand that sometimes I can be a voice for other folks who are in the community because it's protecting their children and their families as well.
People who live in the Mon Valley that still experience these episodes, be they short-term eruptions, really awful smells that keep happening, or even exceedances of air quality standards, is fundamentally unfair, especially to people in the Mon Valley. But it affects all of us in Allegheny County.
For the first time in our history, Allegheny County is in attainment with respect to the EPA pollutant mitigation at all 8 of the monitors throughout the county. It's a big deal because we've never done it. We're improving year after year after year, getting better, and we finally this year got to the point where we have made it. And there was a lot of work that was done, most of it by the health department. They entered in back in 2017 an NOV, a notice of violation, in which they used legal action with the EPA to enforce some monitoring. A couple years later, as part of continued monitoring and enforcement action, they entered into an agreement in which U.S. Steel would spend over $200 million in improving in air pollutant and mitigating factor. We've hired more people to be monitors and enforcement.
This community is very hard hit by air pollution exposure. This is a federally qualified health clinic that's bringing care right to the residents of Clairton. These patients are very underserved, a lot of disparities and health equity issues, and it's very hard for them to access care at the medical centers due to transportation and even just work issues. I teamed up with them recently to try to bring specialty care to these centers.
I think it's wonderful for the community to have an accessible health clinic.
I think that the pandemic has focused perhaps a little bit away from air pollution.
Do I feel like I'm being listened to? No, not by the folks that really have the power to make the decisions.
Are we just going to rest on our laurels? Are we just going to stop? No.
And so it's incumbent upon the people who actually are impacted to take action.
I do think we're seeing progress made. We're actually seeing the Clairton residents, they've formed together into a group called Valley Clean Air Now.
I'm trying to engage community members to let them know they have rights. They can speak up, they can speak out. There's power in numbers. There's power in numbers.